Good morning. Welcome to the Liqui-Grow Lead Academy sessions. We are happy you can join us today and hope to see you at the rest of our sessions scheduled throughout February. You can find a full schedule on our website and at the end of this session. We hope you enjoy this exciting presentation on carbon credits and the carbon markets. Please note that there are two presentations, so stay logged on until the end of the second talk. At that point, we will have Q&A with the presenters, and you can submit questions at any point throughout the session to questions@liqui-grow.com. You can also post them in the YouTube chat. Enjoy the presentation.
My name's Dr. Jake Vostenkemper, and I'm the agronomy lead here at Liqui-Grow, and I'm in charge of agronomy research and product development, as well as helping the company make agronomic decisions.
Thank you, Jake. I'm John Tinsman. I'm the Director of Purchasing, Trading, and Investments at Twin State Liqui-Grow. And I'm also the third generation of the Tinsman family within Twin State Liqui-Grow, which was founded in the 1950s. And we're here today to talk about carbon credits with you because they're getting a lot of buzz in the country, if I'm correct, right, Jake?
Oh man, yeah, John, there's a ton of questions in the countryside from farmers about carbon credits and what it all means. And so, yeah.
So tell me, what is a carbon credit and how do you make one?
Yeah, a carbon credit is, you can earn carbon credits by doing several agronomic practices from what we understand, right? A lot of this is being hashed out yet, but the three that are often talked about are planting cover crops. So if you plant cover crops, that means you can pull some of the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere into those cover crop plants themselves, and then as they degrade, some of the carbon is left behind and it is stored as long-term carbon. Okay, so that would help generate some carbon credits. Another way that a farmer can achieve or generate carbon credits would be transitioning from conventional tillage to no-till, for example, or strip tillage, right? So if you aren't incorporating oxygen into the soil, you're not waking those microbes up and you're not burning off soil organic matter. Okay, so no-till, strip till. Another thing that isn't talked about as much, but it's a very important component of this, is reducing nitrous oxide emissions. Because yes, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, but so is nitrous oxide. And we get nitrous oxide whenever nitrogen denitrifies. So things that are being discussed are reducing nitrogen rates. If you reduce total nitrogen rates for corn, you can eliminate some nitrous oxide emissions. It's also being discussed that we could use things like nitrification inhibitors. So Instinct 2, for example, may become an approved product to add to nitrogen, so we reduce the total nitrous oxide emissions, which is a greenhouse gas. So nitrogen management, cover crops, reducing tillage. Those are the ways that it's being discussed that farmers could earn carbon credits.
And a carbon credit, if I'm correct, is 1 ton of carbon?
Correct. Yep. That's how it's being kind of that's how it's being referenced at the moment. Yes, 1 carbon credit is a ton of carbon. So John, what are some of the companies that are talking about offering carbon credits to farmers? Who are they?
Right. So currently there's some pilot programs in development. And you have companies like Bayer, Indigo, Nutrien, and even the Iowa Soybean Association talking about trying to find some ways to pay farmers for generating carbon credits. But a lot of those programs are in development, and they're not programs that farmers right now could go and sign up to, certainly not in large numbers since they are in development.
Yeah, so it's not like a farmer, any farmer can sign up for a carbon credit today. A lot of these pilot programs are small and they're pretty filled up, you're thinking. That's kind of what we've learned, isn't it?
That's what we've learned, and they're hoping to expand quickly. So they could be something that could become more widespread in the next year. So Jake, a lot of farmers are interested in generating these carbon credits, but are also concerned that their bushels per acre could fall as a result. So what are some things that farmers can do to preserve their cash crop yields as they attempt to create carbon credits?
Yeah, I think most importantly, because cover crops are relatively new, you need to partner with an advisor that can help you walk through how not to reduce your cash crop yields. So that's the most important thing. You need to work with an advisor that can help you understand how not to sacrifice cash crop yields, okay? But some of the high points would be have a plan. How are you going to get that cover crop killed and terminated in a timely manner? Because that's really important. You got to get that cover crop terminated before you can plant your corn, for example, okay? Other factors that I think are going to become more important as we move forward is starter fertilizer, for example. Reams and reams of research would suggest that starter fertilizer in a no-till environment is often a profitable thing for farmers to do. So as we transition from conventional tillage to no tillage, and then you add a cover crop on top of that, you're going to have a lot of cold, wet planting conditions, and starter is likely going to be a lot more beneficial. Okay, so that's one thing farmers can do. Another thing you can do is simply, you're talking about planting into residue, you're talking about no tillage. Is your planter set up to no till? Do you have good row cleaners on that machine? You're going to be planting into wetter conditions. Are the closing wheels the proper closing wheels for planting into wetter conditions than you're used to planting into? So planter setup, how you're going to kill that cover crop, and thinking about using starter fertilizers as we go forward here. So those are 3 simple things that a guy or gal might need to think about.
All right, thank you, Jake. Jake, now we know one of the most important things about making cover crops worthwhile is keeping the cost down to do it. So I have a question for you. Can we simultaneously apply fall fertilizer at the same time as seeding cover crops?
Yes, John. So the answer is yes, but it depends, right? So direct seeding, lots of folks know about direct seeding alfalfa, and we know that we can get a beautiful stand of alfalfa by direct seeding alfalfa with liquid suspensions. Okay, we've been doing that for years. All right, so the concept works. The question is the seed size and density right to flow through our machines? All right, and we know for a fact that annual rye, for example, it overwinters, it can be direct seeded with liquid suspensions. We know that camelina, it's a new cover crop that Iowa State's been researching. It is small and dense. It can be applied very likely be direct seeded with liquid suspensions as well as some others. But to answer your question, yes, that is something we can do, and that's something that I will be looking into a lot more in the future, meaning which specific cover crops can we direct seed? What are some specific attributes of different cover crops that we need to be aware of? And in fact, I'm probably going to transition a lot of I'm probably going to add a lot of cover crop research to the production research I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years here at Twin State Liqui-Grow. So we are gonna walk with the farmer and learn together a lot about how to successfully implement cover crops going forward.
That's very promising.
So John, I clearly have a lot of the agronomics, taking care of a lot of the agronomics and agronomic questions, but how do we help farmers, understand the business of cover crops going forward? How are they going to make this another piece of their portfolio going forward?
Right, so the first question around that would be, how do they qualify? So they need to look back at 5 years of historical data on their farm. Have they been no-tilling in the past, or would this be a new practice? And really what generates a carbon credit is just new practices. So unfortunately, if you've been no-tilling and already doing cover crops, you wouldn't be generating any carbon credits because it would not be a new practice. And when companies pay for carbon credits, companies that have either pledged it to their investors or are required by law to buy carbon offsets. Those companies are specifically looking for newly generated carbon credits that have come from new practices. So it would be, to qualify, you would have to start no-tilling, doing cover crops, and or reducing nitrogen for the first time in 5 years.
So tell me who's buying carbon credits? So the farmers are going to generate the carbon, but who's actually buying the carbon credits?
Well, right now we actually have 1/5 of the S&P 500 companies are pledging to their investors they're going to reduce their carbon or become carbon neutral, possibly by reducing electricity usage or through buying carbon offsets. You also have government involvement at this point. The Biden administration has pledged in his 100-day action in his first couple months in office to start a carbon offset program specifically targeted at farmers.
So we've got private industry as well as the government actively getting involved in setting up these carbon markets and the structure of them. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have a voluntary market, so people are doing it out of their own initiative in companies, and then you do have a legislative environment requiring certain companies like BP in California is required to purchase carbon offsets.
So John, tell me a little bit more about, what is a carbon credit valued at today, and where might we expect that value of a carbon credit to go in the future?
Yeah, so currently a carbon credit is trading for around $15 a credit. So what that $15 credit means is that for every credit generated by a farmer, they could be paid $15 to sell it. And what we're seeing on average out of these initial programs, and this varies widely, but on average they're seeing a half a credit generated per acre, which means a farmer would be paid $7.50 if they adopt practices such as no-till, cover crops, and nitrogen reduction. So $7.50 per acre, but also many of the programs are proposing to pay the farmers over 3 to 5 years. So they may only be paid $3.25 in their first year in the program, or in their first year after implementing the practices. There is a longer payout period and also enrollment in multi-year contracts. Essentially, the purpose behind the multi-year contracts is that the companies want farmers to be dedicated towards upkeeping this practice. The thought is that if a farmer continues back into tilling after no tilling, that would release a lot of the carbon into the atmosphere. So the companies want to guarantee that the farmers are committing to a long-term practice change. And in some cases, these contracts are 10 years long. So it would be committing towards to a long-term contract to continue these practices.
So John, I have to ask, because the farmer's going to ask this right away, $7.50 per acre. It doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, it's going to take some cost to make these changes, and where do we see the market headed? Is that where it's going to stay, do you think? Or?
Right. Well, first off, yes, just to enroll in these programs and have people come out and verify your practice changes and stuff, a farmer might be paying $3,000 to $5,000. So even on a 1,000-acre farm, there could be very little payout, at these numbers. And I think most farmers would know there would be a cost to implementing these practices as well, which might outweigh the financial benefits at this point. But if companies fulfill on their pledge to continue to buy carbon credits in greater numbers and offset their current carbon usage, as well as a legislative push to enforce purchasing carbon credits by law, we could see a large demand for carbon credits enter the market, which would push the price of carbon credits up. And we know that just a few years ago, carbon credits were only trading at $10 a credit. So the price to jump to 15 is already a large jump. And some market analysts think that this price could get as high as $60 in the near future.
Wow. Yeah, $60 per acre would be worth, some folks thinking about making some changes. I mean, I know that's complete speculation, but that's interesting to hear that that's at least possible. Okay, John, so we've talked a lot about carbon credits and the potential and the future of carbon credits. Where does Twin State Liqui-Grow stand right now on carbon credits? What are we doing?
Right, our company is excited about the possibility of carbon credits, and we're in active talks with multiple carbon credit players to be able to roll out these programs to our customers if we believe it'll be beneficial to them. So as soon as we have more, you'll be able to hear from us about how we could roll out these programs once we think it makes sense and once they grow in size.
All right. Thank you, John.
Okay, good morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mariah Murphy. I lead the member owner engagement team here at Truterra. So I work with all of our farmer retailers throughout the Truterra system, and I've been with Land O'Lakes for right at about 8 years. My first 5 years of that, I was actually a seed DSM on the Winfield United side, and so I've been with Truterra the rest of that time. So today I'm going to talk to you all about the carbon market and kind of what is evolving there, what does that look like, and then just open it up for some Q&A. I really want to leave quite a bit of time for Q&A because I think that's super important as the way that this marketplace is developing. I think that, there's going to be a lot more questions than even we may have answers today. And so I'll leave a little bit of time for some Q&A. So just a quick agenda. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview. We're going to talk a bit about the market landscape. And then I'm going to just briefly touch on our program and how we are different, and then some next steps and just a few things to consider. So a lot of you, I'm sure, see within the news outlet the buzz of Truterra, or the buzz of carbon, and all of the marketplaces that are developing, today. So just on the screen, you can see all of these commitments that large companies and buyers have, that they're working on being, America's certified carbon neutral beer. And you're starting to see a lot of things come onto the market of like a carbon neutral pig. You're starting to see a carbon neutral cracker. And so all of these things is what's influencing Land O'Lakes' decision, as well as Truterra's decision to really enter into the carbon marketplace. But it's also, helping our farmers be profitable and maximizing its profitability by getting a return on the carbon that they have. And so I just want to point out, just how many headlines there are in the news today. And this slide's actually a little bit outdated. You can see it's from October, but it's just definitely telling how quickly the tides are changing. And with the current administration, there's definitely some new interest on what the carbon marketplace might look like. And so we're trying to keep up really quickly with all the things that are developing there. So just a few things around sustainability and how the marketing piece actually works. I think that the most key sentence here is that despite the fact that sustainability marketed products are 16.1% of the market, they actually delivered 54% of the CPG market growth. And so CPG is a consumer packaged good. We use that term fairly loosely in the sustainability world. And so a CPG could be anyone from a Walmart to, a Nestle. You think about Kellogg's, any of those, that would be classified as a CPG. And so the really telling thing here is that even though that only represents 16% of the market, they are actually the ones that are exploding in growth. And so what does that tell you? That consumers really want to focus on buying things that are sustainably raised. And so really important as we work through the carbon marketplace, but also just through sustainability in general. I think that's important, that you take a look at how that increase can affect your go-to-market strategy for you as a farmer. So as we take a look today, the carbon market landscape is pretty vast. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of things that I don't even have on this list. And so you take a look at all of the companies that are on here. You see Truterra, Bayer, ESMC, Ecosystem Services. You have Nori, FBN, Indigo. All of these companies are currently in the carbon marketplace. As well as several others that, again, we don't have updated on this slide. And so you can just see kind of the full level of service that they all offer. And we feel like we are in a great position as Land O'Lakes and Truterra to provide our farmers in those CPGs with the highest quality service that they can ask for. So that led us to really build Truterra and Truterra Insights Engine. And so we are a fairly new company. We are about in our 5th or 6th season. We resulted as a merger between what used to be United Suppliers and then Winfield United. And then Land O'Lakes decided that we needed a sustainability segment within our business. And so outborn was Truterra. And so what Truterra did was we really developed the only farmer-owned and the only farmer-driven sustainability program in the United States, which then consisted of the Truterra Insights Engine, which allows us to work with farmers to provide them stewardship and conservation insights, as well as profit-focused areas to where they can, spend their time looking at, how do I become profitable off of a conservation practice, or how do I become profitable working with NRCS through the EQIP and CSP. But now, as we look at the carbon marketplace, it's how do I become profitable selling my carbon to those that are interested. And so we just launched True Carbon. And so I think a few of you are going to sit here and say, well, why would I want to partner, with an ag retailer through selling my carbon? Why is that important? And so there's really 3 key things. Carbon credits require substantial data. There's a lot of data that goes into carbon credits. And I think that it's important right away that farmers understand that we're talking about, between 110 to 120 metric points of just pure data that we would be collecting. So anything, from your overall tillage practice to what is it, how many passes have you made through the field on CPP? What is the exact fertilizer plan? All of those things are points that are accounted for us to help you find a buyer for your carbon credit. The second thing is, that confidence in the carbon credit quality is really key. Buyers, when they come to Truterra and they come to Land O'Lakes, they want to make sure that they're buying the highest quality credit that's on the market. And so how do they do that? They work with us at Truterra using the Truterra Insights engine to focus on our sophisticated agronomic modeling that will show you a variation throughout the entire field and will help us give you a projection as the farmer for your potential carbon stored capacity. And so then we are able to work with those buyers to show them that we do have the utmost high quality carbon credit that is out there. But it also helps them better understand why working with the ag retail model is important. And then the third piece is that the carbon marketplace is really complicated. I think as we navigate this, there's still a lot of unknowns, even for those of us at Truterra that live and breathe this every single day. There's so many unknowns that we haven't even thought of yet that need to be figured out. But what we are trying to do is we're trying to bring farmers like yourselves, the efficiency and the transparency and the quality, all while maximizing that on-farm revenue potential through the carbon marketplace. And so those are really the three key reasons why I would say, that's why you would want to align with your retailer through a carbon marketplace. So whenever you think about farming carbon, it's really no different than how you would think about, farming regularly. I mean, you grow a corn crop every year, you put the corn crop in the bin, you get bushels of grain, right? This is no different. So every year you would just be farming carbon. And every year that you continue that same practice change or that same practice of no-till or cover crops or strip till, you would then be generating what we call carbon, right? And so then you would be generating carbon credits. And therefore, every year you would have some sort of carbon credit to actually sell to the open market. And so that's really important that farmers kind of shift their way of thinking of just selling their grain on a year-to-year basis to now they're going to sell now you're going to sell your carbon. You now have another crop that you have the ability to sell. And so it's really important that as you hear about carbon and you think about it, think of this as a whole new business opportunity for you to be able to now sell a second crop. So now I just want to talk about a little bit about how we're different. And so our differentiators is, you're buying the right to the credit. You're not buying. We're buying the right to the, we are buying the credit, right? So we're buying the actual credit. We're not buying the rights to the credit. Now, why is that important? Because as you work with companies, let's just say you work with a major carbon credit company, they will have you sign a contract for, 10 to 15 years. So you sign that contract. And so through the duration of that contract, they then have the rights to not only the first year's credit, but also every credit that you generate beyond that. And so now you're really at their disposal to allow them to set the market price, to allow them to pay you whatever they feel is the market price for that credit. We at Truterra are truly focused on just buying the credit. And so I think it's super important that, as you take a look at that, what you're getting into if you're trying to ponder about which way to go in the carbon market. So we buy the credit, and then you have the ability to sell the future credits, to whoever you want to. So you can sell them to us again, you could sell them to someone else, but this opens up the ability for you to sell to multiple people, which is important because a lot of the time, you're just stuck with that same company. We're really focused on aligning with our retailers to bring, as much value to the farmer as we can. And so that's why, we're paying for vintage credits, and so as you take a look at that, this is a look back period, right? And so what we call vintage credits is something that's obviously happened in the past. And so what that means is you have the ability to get paid for something that you've done previously. It's not that the other thing is we're not asking a farmer to change something right now. This is something that you have already done. This is something that you have obviously thought was a good idea. And so you probably had planned on doing it going forward anyway. And so I think that's the other thing that you should, carefully consider as you get into a carbon market is that, okay, is this something with additionality that they want me to make a change, on year one. And then even if I don't like that change, I have to continue that change year over year. And so I think that's extremely important that you figure out exactly, what that is as you work through. And so I throw this up on here because it's the path of a generated carbon and ecosystem credit. Carbon credits go through an immense amount of touch points. And so there's a large list of people that touch the carbon credit from beginning to end. And so, I just throw this up here because a lot of people say, well, why can't they pay me, $60, right, per credit? Well, the reality is there's a lot of middlemen in the carbon marketplace. And so I purely just throw this up here so that way you can see all the exact steps that it goes through. And so you can see kind of why the margin is where it is whenever you're talking about the carbon marketplace. So what do we think the future looks like? What is the future of the carbon marketplace? Our vision is really to be, the carbon cooperative. We want to be, that place where you as the farmer can come and you can say, hey, I sold last year's credit. I can sell this year's credit. What do you have to offer? And we have the ability to offer you 4 or 5 things. That's really what our thought process is. We want to be kind of that manager, so that way you can say, I want to look here for this field. I want to look here for this field. And you're not locked into just one single place. And so I think that that's important because you now have options to where if you're working with just one sole company, you may not have as many options that you could possibly have somewhere else. And so that's really our goal, is to help you as the grower have multiple options and multiple outlets to sell your carbon. So just a few things to consider as we kind of wrap up here and open it for questions is that, markets are evolving rapidly and with more likely to come. And I say that because with the new administration, things are evolving very quickly and changing on a very, rapid basis. And so as we even throw these slides up, I'm sure that there's things that are outdated, and so I just say, be cautious and watch, specific pieces on this if you're seriously thinking about getting into it, because things do change really quickly. Commitments and payouts vary greatly. And I couldn't say that more. Every company is going to offer you what they feel like the market price is. There's no set market price. I get that question all the time of, well, what is the market price? Well, it's whatever, someone is willing to pay for it. And so I think that, you just need to do your homework and make sure that, you're comfortable with what you're getting and you're overall satisfied with the offer that you received. And then I would say that, other things to consider, which we already went over, most programs are purchasing growers' rights to market their carbon credits. Again, that's important because it's basically like mineral rights, right? And so you guys want to make sure that you're always in control of your carbon credits. You don't want to give away your rights. And so just, exercise caution, understand the contract, and then understand that the credits that are sold today cannot be sold in future markets. So if you sell a credit today for $5 and tomorrow, someone offers you $20 for the same credit, you've already sold your credit and it goes into a verified registry. And then the last thing is, practice change must be new or recent. And so this is where a lot of you long-term no-tillers can get a little frustrated, because a lot of these carbon marketplaces are really focused on growers that have changed a practice. And when I say changed a practice, I mean, either switched from tillage to no-till or added cover crops within the last 5 years. And so it's really focused on those growers that have made a change because they are sequestering carbon at a quicker rate than someone that has made the change over the last 20 years. And again, that is truly a marketplace rule. That's not a rule that we at Truterra came up with, or Land O'Lakes or anything like that. that is a buyer requested rule. And the other thing I would say to consider is that every single buyer, so whether the buyer may be an Amazon or Hy-Vee or whoever it is, right? Those buyers may have other specific things that they're looking for. And so, each carbon credit generation may be different depending on what company you work with. And so those are just a few things that I would say, definitely consider as you look into getting into this. But, with that, I like I said, I want to open it up to a bunch of questions. I want to make sure that you guys have the answers that you're looking for, have the knowledge that you need. And thank you.
Thank you to our presenters for those excellent presentations. We are fortunate to have our presenters with us today to take questions. So let's go ahead and get started. As a reminder, you can submit questions to questions@liqui-grow.com. Okay, first question for John. John, this is a rapidly changing market. Have there been any new developments in the carbon area for Twin State Liqui-Grow over the past month?
Yes, we are working with some of the leading carbon credit program providers in the nation right now. And our goal is to bring our customers the very best program in the country, something that will pay the most per credit and also have the most advantageous terms for our customers. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to release something by this summer, but as soon as a few weeks is also possible. So we're really looking forward to be able to provide that to our farmers soon.
Okay, good. Thank you. So John, I have another question coming in. How does carbon work?
Right. Well, just when a plant grows, you can see all that growth on a plant, whether it's the roots or the leaves, and that's actually all made out of carbon that it's taking out of the atmosphere. So when it takes that carbon out of the atmosphere and it forms organic matter that then decays into the soil, that is carbon, and that can be measured and that can be weighed. And so for each ton of carbon, which is all that organic matter from plants, that would be how a carbon credit is made.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Mariah, maybe this would be a good question for you. This is coming in off the YouTube chat. Proving past 5 years of cover crops may be somewhat easy as many acres were cost shared through NRCS, but what about acres no-tilled, not under CSP or other, maybe climate field view imagery?
Yep, so great question. So we're still working through a few things today, but ideally that's going to be probably the best method of making sure that a grower has done, those 5 years worth of no-till practices. I do anticipate a lot of it will be through imagery as we move forward, but in a lot of cases, that's all still kind of being worked out with a lot of suppliers today.
Okay, so just to clarify, I have another question. If I have been no-tilling for 20 years, can I still get 5 years worth of carbon credits for my no-till practice?
Yeah, so unfortunately today for our program specifically, I can't speak to others, but you are not eligible. And the reason is because that is truly what the industry is set on buying. And so the industry is really focused on getting the most bang for their buck. And so as you make that practice change, 5 years ago, you're actually sequestering that carbon at a quicker rate. And so they're wanting to buy, the last 5 years. Once you get to about 20 or 30 years, your carbon sequestration kind of flattens out. And so you actually just kind of get at a flat pan. And so that's where you get a lot of buyers wanting to buy the most recent practice change because you are sequestering carbon at a much quicker rate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jake, I'll throw a question your way. Why would someone want to purchase a carbon credit and how does it benefit them?
I mean, someone would want to purchase a carbon credit. You mean, why would a farmer want to sell a carbon credit, I assume?
Or maybe they're asking why a company wants to buy carbon credits.
Okay, I'll answer it that way. So a company would want to buy carbon credits because they're trying to offset their carbon emissions, would be one example. Okay, so if a coal-fired power plant has made a commitment to its shareholders that it's going to be carbon neutral by 2035, One of the ways that it could offset those carbon emissions would be to buy a carbon credit from a farmer, for example. In another example, let's say that you have a company like Kraft Foods or Pepsi Cola or Coca Cola, just for example. Let's say that they made a commitment to their consumers that they were going to be carbon neutral by 2030. Well, they could again buy a carbon credit from a farmer to meet those objectives.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question for Mariah. What changes do you anticipate in this market in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so I think that this market is so rapidly evolving. I think we'll start to see, a few things. I think, right now you're seeing a lot of look back periods. So we're calling those the vintage credits, just like what we have the 5-year look back. I'm not so sure that that's going to continue to be an industry standard. I think what you'll start to see a lot of is more of just the forward looking. And so that would be things that, you would have to do with additionality. So making that practice change. I anticipate that a lot of it's going to move that way. And so in order to get paid for carbon, it'll be, making a change to no-till or making a change with an addition of cover crops. And so at that point, you would want to really make sure that the value of the carbon credit is worth, what you're doing for adding those cover crops and things like that. The other thing, that I think is interesting, particularly with this administration, is that they have a lot of conversations around what does that look like, and so how can they be a part of, maybe the carbon credit market. We've heard some rumblings, they maybe want to do some commodity trading around carbon credits. And so there's a lot of things that are happening in DC right now, in particular around carbon credits. But I think, I would just say, if you can get paid for back credits right now, I think that that's a great way to start, because more than likely you won't get that again. But as you look forward, I think that you just want to be really cautious whenever you sign contracts.
Okay, thanks. I have another question coming in through the chat.
Sure.
For Mariah. Can a farmer pick one practice to modify, such as nitrogen reduction, and qualify for carbon credits, or does it have to be a full management program, such as tillage, cover crops, et cetera?
Yep. So at this point, it really needs to be a full management change. So something switching to a cover crops, or adding or switching to no-till. So that's really what most buyers are focused on today. They're not so focused on the nitrogen reduction.
Okay. Another question from the chat is, will strip till be treated the same as no-till?
Yep. So you can do strip till. You're not going to sequester quite as much carbon, but strip till is allowed. Yes.
Okay. Another question, would putting in 60 feet or 100 feet buffer zones of native grasses along creeks and streams, would that qualify for a carbon credit?
So technically you would be sequestering carbon, but it's not going to work for a carbon credit. No, you would need to do a whole field practice.
Okay. Another question, and maybe we'll start with you, Mariah, and then if Jake or John want to share any insight. If somebody wants to stay up to date on this topic, what is the best source of information? We'll start with Mariah.
Yeah, so I think, I think just a lot of it is obviously internet based, just reading as much as you can, doing your homework on as many companies as you can. There's so many companies out there that are offering carbon credits, and there's so many, differing contracts out there. I just would say, there's probably not just like one great source for carbon information. I think that it's truly just a bunch of different sources, and you doing your homework and spending the time to really collect that information, so that way you can be, as efficient as possible whenever you go to sign up your acres.
And John, what are you using to monitor the markets and stay up to date on this?
We're in talks currently with some of the leading providers, and those providers right now, whether it's Indigo or Truterra, are currently developing their programs and rolling them out. So we're hoping to stay up to date with those providers, and And when the time comes that they're ready to sign up customers, we're going to be able to have our customers take part in that as well.
Okay, so that was a question that just came through. How will we be notified when the program is up and running and available for sign up?
We're going to have a release to our customers, and we'll have our salesmen notify our customers.
Okay, great. Let me
Lisa,
check.
I would add by saying, you know, just because John and I have been talking to these companies and trying to figure out the different programs, you know, I would say go to your local Liqui-Grow location and talk to your salesman about it. They're obviously free to contact John or I at any time. And so again, just because we've been talking to so many companies, we have a pretty good feel for what's actually attainable more than just talk or word of mouth. So, you know, feel free to reach out to your Liqui-Grow salesman. And if they can't answer the question, they can contact John or I.
Okay, and that was actually one of the questions that came in is if I'm interested in more information, what's the first step? So is that what you're recommending is go to the retail location first and then they'll take it from there?
And if they want to contact us from there, or if they feel they can't answer the question that's asked, yeah, obviously my phone is always on and you can contact John or I.
Okay, and then I have a comment from the chat that says the $7.50 is not much incentive. There will need to be a way to minimize the cost or profit that is associated with the middleman's fees. Mariah, do you want to address that?
I can, yep, and then John and Jay can chime in. But you know, so I think that as you take a look at the carbon credit market today, it's still really new, right? And so this is something that, you know, there's a lot of people trying to get their hands on, and there's a lot of companies trying to grasp like really what is doable within the carbon credit market and what's not doable. And so I think that as we get a little bit further down the road in terms of carbon credits, you'll start to see some of that kind of flatten out, and you'll start to see some of those middlemen kind of phase out, and there will be a lot more streamlined approach. I don't think you're ever going to see, you know, like the verification fees and the registry fees. I don't think you're ever going to see those types of things go away, but I definitely do see that there is some room for some more generation for the farmer. And so I think that that's where, you know, it's great to be a pioneer and it's great to be a leader in the carbon credit marketplace, but it's also, you know, sometimes you run the risk of, you know, maybe capturing a few dollars less than what you might if you wait, you know, 15 years, right? But do I think that the carbon credit price is going to go up in 15 years? No, I really don't. I don't foresee that you're going to get $100 for a carbon credit at some point. I just don't think that companies are willing to pay that much. And so, you know, I think it's just a little bit of give and take. And again, you know, it's all about doing your homework and making sure that you have the program that is best for you. And you know, if you can get a lump sum payment, I think that's probably a very wise decision based on where we're at today, instead of spreading it out. You know, so I think that eventually you'll start to see some of that phase out, but I don't know that you're going to get much more than what is there today.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Mariah answered most of this, but I think it would be most advantageous for farmers that are currently already deciding that they need to switch to no-till, or they need to preserve, you know, runoff on their land, and so they're going to be making these practice changes anyways. And this is a way to, you know, help get them paid for those practice changes. But this might not necessarily apply. I mean, even if the carbon credit was $30 or $60, it still might not apply to the most productive farmland in Iowa on flat land. It probably still might not make sense at that point. But that's something that Jake, our agronomist, is studying very closely to be able to help advise our clients. You know, when does it make sense?
I think that's a great point, John. I think that it's, you know, really important that, you know, a lot of the carbon market today is around practices that these farmers have already done, right? And so if you can get paid for a change that you already thought was a good idea, I think that's the best place to start, right? I don't think that it should be all around making, you know, a change just to get paid. I think if you're already doing these practices, you're probably, you know, better off than most. And that's where you can really, you know, capture a lot of that profitability back to you.
Anything to add, Jake?
Yeah, I also, well, I don't think we know yet, but it's possible that the government may still offer programs to help cost share the cost of cover crops, for example, right? So if the government's going to, cost share cover crops and the cover crop cost is paid for, that's a good chunk of the cost in initiating carbon storage, right? So, there could be cost share programs that could help offset some of the initial cost if the carbon credit itself can't cover that cost. That's possible, don't you think, Mariah?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. I actually missed that. Yeah, but that's a great point. We encourage, anyone that is considering working through the carbon market, if you can double up through, EQIP or CSP, absolutely, by all means, we encourage that. And I will just say, it depends on every contract. With ours specifically, you can do that. Some of them, they don't allow that, but absolutely look into that and utilize all of those programs.
So the other thing, John and I are talking with the company today, it's very watershed specific, but it appears that you can stack on things like carbon credits, nutrient reduction, and get paid even more than just kind of what the value of a carbon credit on the market is today. So that's another option that's probably going to be a little more attractive or lucrative, so to speak. But there's some other things attached to it. So again, John and I are talking with that group today, but it's going to be very watershed specific.
Okay. I have another question from the chat. Is there a larger force at play here for a sustainably sourced label to the consumer? Maybe John, this one's for you. Is this seen as a gateway to this end that has been sluggish in getting off the ground?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, right? There's large companies that operate within our footprint that source, say, their corn and such for their products here, and they want to be able to go back and say to their shareholders and say to their customers that, hey, this was sustainably sourced. This not only did this product that we're adding into our, or not only did this corn that we're adding into our product make the environment better off, it also sequestered carbon, and I think that actually is playing into a role. But if you look at some of the proposals also in legislation, companies like BP in California are required to buy carbon offsets by law. And so there's a chance with a Democratic-led government that we start moving towards more of a legal requirement of it, and not just a voluntary, which is what the market is based off of mostly today.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question. If carbon sequestering flattens out over 20 years of the same field, how is this long-term profitable for farmers beyond 20 to 30 years? Would this make carbon credits more scarce or worth more, hypothetically? You want to take that one?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think, as you take a look at, the flattening out of the carbon credit, it's almost I don't know that it's going to make carbon credits scarce. I mean, there's a lot more carbon credit availability than I think what anyone even realizes. And so I don't think that it's going to create, some sort of environment where it's going to just raise the price. I think what you'll see over time is, while we're thinking about just like no-till or cover crops, if you have someone that has to do a practice change, midway through, let's just say, even at year 20, right? And then they till it up, well, then you have the ability to kind of regenerate that carbon as you've let it out of the ground. And so I don't foresee that it's going to create any sort of scarce environment. I think that, more so you're going to just see farmers start to realize that they have this available. And so I think you'll start to see a little bit of an oversupply at some point.
Okay, Jake, next question. Thank you, Mariah. Jake, next question off the chat. How are credits measured? Are they basically more of an estimate, or is there some sort of accurate measurement?
That may be a better question for Mariah, but I have been watching, I've been reading some papers lately and watching some videos. It looks like there's going to be a soil measurement component. And right now, like the soil health or the there's some groups, some scientific groups out there that are trying to figure out what is the best and most practical and cost-effective way to actually accurately measure soil organic carbon changes. So one thing they definitely know is that you're not going to be able to send it off to a laboratory and get your standard, loss on ignition, a soil organic matter test. It's going to have to be a soil organic carbon test. So I think we're still hashing those things out. Mariah, you actually might have a little better insight on that than I do, actually.
Yeah, so today there's really two tests that are run. So you have a bulk density test, and then you have a soil organic carbon storage potential test. And so those are the ones that are giving you the accurate measurement. A lot of it, it can either be field specific or it can be in like little ecoregions. And so as you have, a group of maybe 5 or 6 fields together, what you'll do is you'll take a baseline of a field that's not enrolled into a carbon market, and you'll see what the storage potential is there. And then you'll take that little ecoregion, maybe that group of 6 or 7 fields, and you'll take 1 or 2 samples. And then you will just kind of adjust the baseline based off of that. That's how a lot of them are looking today in terms of their overall plan. But it is just really 2 things: the bulk density test and the soil organic carbon potential test. And it is not a normal soil test. It's not anything with nutrients or anything like that. It truly is a very specific test that not every lab can do at this point. And so that's another thing to consider. It is a much more expensive soil test than just a normal, soil sample.
Mariah, I think another thing that farmers need to kind of consider, and again, this is so new, we don't have all the details hashed out, but one of the, in some of these papers that I've been reading, it sure looks like the potential to store organic carbon increases with less clay in the soil. So maybe a farmer needs to think about, okay, what production units or which fields could I capture the most carbon in? So in other words, which fields make the most economic sense for me to enroll cover crops or no-till?
Agreed.
It also has a lot to do with temperature regimes and moisture regimes of areas. So I think we're going to find that there's some fields that are just more suitable to storing carbon, and those may be the ones that a farmer wants to target because it's just more economical to do so.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that that's definitely very important. I think as you look at an overall carbon credit strategy for your operation, I think you look at it as a field by field case. I don't think you look at this as an entire operation. I think that you enroll on a field by field case and not your entire operation, so you're not completely restricted. And that's where I think a lot of farmers do get into trouble, if I'm being honest with you. I think that they just sign up the whole farm and then they're kind of stuck with it. And so, do your due diligence and really, do your homework to make sure that you're doing, the best that you can.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it, Mariah, but I think if you try to enroll the entire operation on 1,000 acres, then you have 1,000 acres of cover crops you have to get seeded year one, and I think starting small, you're probably going to set yourself up for better success anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have the ability to, even enroll in multiple programs, right? So you're not just, with one specific company. You can maybe, enroll in a couple, which is good.
Okay, thank you to both of you. Next question from the chat. I'm really interested in the direct applied cover crops. Those get applied in liquid suspension by floaters just on top of the soil, ?
Correct. There's several cover crops we can direct seed that we know for sure that we have direct seeded with suspension fertilizers. Camelina is a new one that I've just kind of discovered. It's very small. It's even smaller than alfalfa. Somewhere between 350,000 and 500,000 seeds per pound. So extremely tiny seeded, has a dense seed coat. That would be broadcast applied with liquid suspensions. I think you're going to find you get a pretty good stand doing that because there's something called a seed priming effect. In other words, the seed starts to imbibe a little bit of water before you actually apply it to the soil surface, and that it starts the germination process. It's not that there has to be some water in the soil and or rain, but I think you're going to find you're going to get a pretty good stand doing that, particularly with these really small seeded cover crops. And I think we have to be careful about doing tillage. With camelina, for example, some very light tillage would probably help, but aggressive tillage may actually make it worse because the smaller the seed, the shallower it needs to be planted. So it's going to be very cover crop and seed specific, which is why it's important to partner with an organization like us that's thinking about these very specific qualities of these different cover crop seeds to help the farmer be successful in getting them established.
Thank you, Jay. Okay. I think we have time for probably one more. We'll see if any other questions come through. Feel free to send them in, but otherwise, what if I plow the land after I have no-tilled for years and then start to no-till again?
Yeah, so we thought that might be the case with a lot of farmers. So realistically, obviously, we understand that, it does kind of seem like if you've been doing the right thing for a long time, why would you not just till it up and start over and then you can get paid, right? At Land O'Lakes and at Truterra, we're working really hard to work with our buyers so that way they want to purchase those credits that, have been there for, 15, 20 years. We understand the importance and you guys have been doing the right thing. And so we also agree that it doesn't seem right. I will say, if you did choose to do that, you would have to have a 3-year waiting period before you could then go back to no-till to get paid for our program specifically. And so I would just caution you, if you decide you're going to just plow it up and then hope to get paid the next year, there are some, definite, rules around just switching immediately back. You would have to wait 3 years for us.
We also talked, Mariah, about how, after a 25 or 30-year period, you do reduce the ability of a carbon to continue to store carbon. So
yeah,
I guess if I were a farmer, I understand it's not fair. Frankly, I'd be a little bit hacked off too. I get it. But I think real hard about tilling up your no-till just so you can reapply, because you might find out that soil no longer is all that effective at storing carbon anyway. So I'd be careful.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else to add to that? Otherwise, I think that was we're wrapping up. It's 9:57. I do have one more last question. Okay. Can you sell carbon credits on a field that's enrolled in CRP, such as a switchgrass field? That'll be our last question.
Yeah, so a lot of questions are on that. Today, no. Do I see that coming in the future? I do. But today you cannot.
Okay. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. This is sorry, Jake, go ahead.
Can I ask for a little more clarification on that, possibly, Mariah?
Sure.
Yeah.
Are they talking about taking, if you take ground out of production, then you could get a carbon sequestration payment for taking out of production, putting in some native grass?
That was what I was thinking that they were saying, if they were switching something into CRP along those lines, because I get that question quite a bit. Is that what you think they were meaning?
Oh, yeah, I'm asking you what's a little more definition around what's been discussed.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so I'm thinking more along the lines of, if someone has switched to CRP, buyers are not willing to pay on that so much. If it's just like a, over winter type thing, more of like a cover crop scenario, then yes. But just a native grass, they're not willing to buy. Even though they are sequestering carbon, even though it has taken production, out, it has taken things out of production, they're still not willing to purchase those credits at this time. I'm not saying never, because I do think that that's something that's going to come up. And as you take a look at, more of like those California markets and the tree crops and things like that, obviously they're very, very good fits for carbon markets. And so I just think that, we're in a very early stage, and we're really early in the development of carbon markets in general, that there's still a lot of rules that are kind of being ironed out here. And so, what it looks like today is not what it's going to look like in 6 months. I can almost guarantee that. So I would just say, if that's, of interest, I would just kind of wait. But if you have fields that are ready today, I would enroll them.
Okay, anything from anybody else on the speakers panel? Okay, thank you. That was awesome. And thanks to the audience for joining our first session. This is the very first session that we've held. We're going to have 8 more throughout the month of February. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, and if there are questions we didn't get to, we will definitely be following up with you individually. But you can also contact your Liqui-Grow sales rep, or you can email us at questions@liqui-grow.com. And we hope to see you at the rest of our Lead Academy sessions in February. The next one is on Thursday, again at 9 a.m. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.